Okay, good morning. We're going to look this morning at chapter 4. First, I want to run through some of the psukim, and then we're going to drill down a little bit on a lot of phrases that maybe will make you think about it. Not, it certainly catches my attention when I read these phrases, which is why we're going to look through the Chumash as well. We're going to flip around a bit. So I'm going to give you that. Oh, you have the Tanakh also. Okay, so all right. So this way we'll we're still in the mode of okay. There's leaving Egypt and entering Israel. So we looked at some of the comparisons and some of the contrasts, but there's no question that the text wants you to think about the Exodus or the events leading up to the Exodus, or perhaps even the events after the Exodus, be it for 40 years. And look at it vis-a-vis where we are right now. And it's appropriate because this week is Parshas Bo. This is the week. This is the Parsha of the Exodus. Even though next week Beshalach gets all the excitement because of the Shiur and the sea, but really Bo is when they leave. It says that they left after 430 years. And if you want to drive yourself crazy, figure out how many years were they actually in Egypt, because the Torah says a bunch of different things, and trying to reconcile those numbers is complicated. If you want to see one of the more complicated Rashis and Chumash about the 430 years, okay, but that's a different Shiur for a different time. So I think that we just still have to kind of look at the mode, the attitude of the people, which we already last time we talked about, kind of rushing out versus rushing out in fear and unknown, and the sea around them swirling versus now there's like they patiently can walk across and the sea is stopped, 25 miles away, and they could just kind of like prance across and take their time. Or we'll see, do they actually take their time or not? But certainly the fear is not there this time, even though there's probably a fear of what comes ahead, but it's a different type of fear. So let's look at the beginning of Perek Daled, and we're going to do maybe half of the Perek, and then we'll come back and see some of the verses. Vayomer Hashem el Yehoshua lemor. Hashem says to Yehoshua. So first of all, it's not even a Vayidaber, it's a Vayomer, right? You have that chapter 4 with me. Vayomer is not, Vaidaber is a commandment. Well, this is not a commandment. This is Hashem just indicating, okay, now it's time to go. You with me?
Yeah. No.
Chapter 4.
Yehoshua? Vayhi kasher tamu kol hagoy lavor.
Yeah, that's it, right. I'm saying, so, I'm sorry, I started in the middle of Pasuk. Vahika, right, because of space, right? I looked at the my bad. Thank you. Vahika shetam go galav. So after everybody has crossed over, okay. So then Vayomer Hashem Yeshua. So Hashem says to Yehoshua, Kichulachem min ha'am shneim asar anashim ish echad mishavet. Take for yourselves from the nation 12 men, one from each tribe. Vitzavu osam lemor, and command them as following. Se'ulachem mizeh mitoch hayarden, mimatzav raglei konim hachin shteim esrei avanim, v'ha'avartem osam imachem v'inachtem osam b'malon asher talinu bo halayla. A very, very strange and oddly worded pasuk. You have to command them, say, carry for yourselves from here, from the middle of the Jordan, from the station of the feet of the Kohanim, making ready 12 stones, and bring them across with you and set them in the Malon, in the lodging place where you will spend the night. Okay. Now, what's the lodging place? Here it says in the bottom of the note, we learned from Chazal, this is Gilgal. That now we know that we know in advance what's supposed to happen. Okay, so before we go further, if you look in Parshas Ki Savo, so it's Deuteronomy and the end of the Chumash, again when they were getting ready to get ready to leave. Okay, so and this is before the Tochacha. So in Ki Savo, look at it's chapter 27. 27 in Deuteronomy, Devarim 27. Kisava. If you want, if it'll be easy, if you want to just follow, I'll call out the pages in here if that's easier for you. If you have a stone chumash, it's 1072. Okay, 1072. Yeah, we're a lot. This is like where a whiteboard would come in handy, but or a smart board, but I'm not smart enough to use a smart board. Our kids are still, they know so much stuff. Our kids, it's like, wow. So this is right after we have the mitzvah of Bikurim, before we have the Tochacha. And it says, Vaitzav Moshe v'ziknei Yisrael sa'am le'mor. Hashem, Moshe and the elders, they commanded the nation, saying, you have to guard all the commandments. Now, look at this, pasuk base. V'haya bayom asher tavru es hayardein el haaretz asher Hashem l'karnas elach. What should you do on the day that you cross the Jordan? Wait a minute, well, that's what we're learning right now. They just crossed the Jordan. It says, Vahi kitamu, the pasuk that I neglected to read the first half of, right? As soon as they finished crossing the entire Yarden, so now it can come true. We know what's supposed to happen because we were told already in Kisavo. So what happens? Now here the Torah says you should set up great stones and you'll coat them with sid, with plaster. V'chasavta aleihem es kol divrei haTorah azos bavrecha leman asher tavo al aretz asher Hashem Elokecha nosen lecha eretz zavas chalav v'davash kasher dibar Hashem Elokecha Elokei v'secha lach. You'll inscribe them all the words of the Torah when you cross over, so you may enter the land that Hashem your God gives you, milk and honey, etc. That Hashem's promised. Now, by the way, I once gave a share in this number years ago about what exactly did they write on these rocks. It says you should write Kol divrei haTorah hazos, all these words of the Torah, of this Torah. Does it mean the entire 5 books of Moses, which by the way isn't finished yet at this point, or is it just certain highlights? How did they write it on there? Like, who wrote it? Didn't this take time? And then I said, that if you ever traveling somewhere and they're like, oh yeah, I could show you like an entire book written on a piece of rice. You ever see those things? Like some Michigas, or like you want to take a penny and crush it in the rest stop, and then I don't know, all kinds of nonsense you could do. Tourists love nonsense. You want fudge, and for some reason tourists like fudge. I don't know why, but so how they read, and he says, so then what do you do with the rocks? V'haya ba'avrchem asiyardein takim lesavanim ha'ela asher nachim tzaveischem hayom b'har eval v'sato osam b'sid. He says, then when you cross the Jordan, you're going to erect these stones on Mount Aval and coat them with plaster. Now already we start getting into a little bit of logistics, okay? I should have busted out my map again. But Har Aval, much like we saw last time, Mount Aval is called, and by the way, it's called Har Grizim and Har Aval, which we have, it says that they lined up on either side, and they would give the curses and the blessings. That's why it's called today Har Bracha. Mm-hmm. Har Bracha, which is right outside of Shechem. So if you ever want to drive up, if you ever visited the Samaritans, they're very good. The Samaritans, whatever they call them. The people that they have the Shomronim, they have very large ears, by the way. It's like a physical trait of theirs. And they have a whole thing where they show you, they do the Karban Pesach. People flock from all over to see them do this Karban Pesach. They have a certain tradition that they have. But there's a place, first of all, before you get to Har Bracha, there's a place called Techina Har Bracha. The best tahina in Israel. They have like a soft serve machine. You can get into a cup right out of the thing. It's like, oh my gosh, it's warm and it's like really, really good. But Har Bracha, so when we talk about, let's say, the Penei Halacha of Rav Malamed, who is the Rav of Har Bracha, but that's overlooking Shechem, and there's a lookout there where you can look into Shechem, but you say, this is Har Grizim, this is Har Eval. Now, wait a minute, geographically speaking though, to go to Shechem, which is smack dab in the middle of the country, from Jordan, that's a bit of a travel, okay? Let's just hold on to that for a second, and then you're going to take the rocks there, and then you're going to plaster them. Is it the first time or the second time? Uvanisa sham mizbeach l'Hashem Elokecha mizbeach avadim l'sim l'barzan. You have to make a mizbeach there. Avanim shleimos tivnes mizbeach Hashem Elokecha v'alisa olav olos Allah l'Hashem Elokecha. You have to bring certain offerings, etc., etc. And then you're going to write down the last pasuk here says v'chasavta l'avanim es kol divrei Torah zos ba'er heitev. Then you have to write down all of the words of the Torah, Be'er Heitev, well clarified, which we're told in a couple of places in Chazal, means they had to write it, not only the whole Torah, but they had to write it in 70 languages. That's a lot of pieces of rice. How they wrote in, who knew 70 languages? But we're told already in Devarim what was supposed to happen. So here, it's saying, Okay, so he tells them, maybe this is the start of this process. You're going to take them with you, and you take them bamalon, because you're not going to get there right away. But there has to be some sort of divine intervention. Okay, so the malon is, so it says here based on the Gemara, it was referring to Gilgal, the final stop on the day's journey from the Jordan to the two mountains, which is Har Gerizim and Har Eval. From there to Gilgal. Obviously, the many events of the long day could only have happened miraculously, right? Because to be able to travel that far, that many people back and forth, not so easy. Okay. I just traveled with like 7 and 8 people, not so easy, let alone 1 million people. Okay. Do you know how many things have to go right when you travel with 7 people? It's like the plane has to be, the car has to be big enough, everybody has to have their stuff, and apparently everybody wants to eat every day. I don't know what that is. Well, I tell them you're on the 1 meal a day plan. That's it. Yeah. But everybody, Baruch Hashem, it worked. I was able to see the Grand Canyon for the first time in our lives. I never saw the Grand Canyon. Pretty, you've seen it on TV. I saw it on the Brady Bunch, a 3-part episode from back in the day with Vincent Price. And when you walk up to it for the first time, that was like a foot of snow. So it was really cool. And you're like, wow. Like, wow, there's a special bracha. You make Osam Masa Bereshis. It's really something then. And that really has meaning. Really, really cool. Anyway, I did not make the same bracha when I saw Las Vegas for the first time. So he tells them, okay, you're going to take these rocks and go to Malon. So, verse 4. Vayikra Yehoshua, back in Yehoshua, El Shneim ha'asar ish, asher hechin b'bnei Yisrael, ish echad mishavet. So Yehoshua then calls the 12 men that were prepared from the children of Israel, ish echad, 1 for each tribe. So that's a grammatical question. So Lena asks, why is it shavet instead of shevet? With the forgiveness of our master Hebrew teacher online here, when you have well, I know, but I want to show that I actually know some stuff. This is one that I actually know. When you have a double segel, and it comes either in a nachta or sof pasuk at the end of a sentence. Now, end of a pasuk is not only the end of a sentence. The end of a pasuk can also be at nachta. We see the trup, the upside down wishbone. You see like the word Yisrael. Okay, that symbol under it is called at nachta. That's also period. But each pasuk usually has 2 sentences. It's what we call a hard stop. It's a hard mafsik. And if you have a double segel in a word, becomes so like eretz becomes aretz, shevet becomes shavet, like things like that. That's just that's a grammatical thingy, which of course with everything in Hebrew grammar there's like a million exceptions, and then you could drive yourself crazy. So Hebrew is a very hard language in terms of rules to follow because there's so many exceptions. But okay, it's still fascinating nonetheless, and I'm still in. You got me. Okay, so mishavet vayomer lahem Yehoshua. Ivru lifnei Aaron Hashem Elokechem al toch hayarden, v'harim alachem ish even achas al shichmo lemispar shiftei b'nei Yisrael. So Yeshua says, pass before the ark of Hashem, your God, in the middle of the Jordan, and each of you will lift a stone upon shichmo, upon your shoulder, according to the number of tribes of the children of Israel. So they have to get these stones ready. They have to pick them up from the Yarden. They have to carry them on their shoulder. Okay, I'm presenting this very deliberately because I want to make your brain think like, wait a minute, what does this remind us of? And some of the words or some of these episodes, carrying something on your shoulder as you're crossing, right? When's the last time we did that? The what? Right. That's this week's parsha. We're going to look at all this. And you'll be like, wow, this is really, really cool. Or you're going to say, wow, he thinks this is really cool. One or the other. Lamad tiazos os bikir bechem, ki sha'alun b'neichen machar le'mar ma havanim ha'ela lachem, so that this will be a sign in your midst when your children ask tomorrow, saying, of what significance are these stones to you? Va'amartem lahem, and you shall say to them, Lahem, asher nechresu meimei hayarden mipnei Aron bris Hashem ba'avra b'yarden nechresu mei hayarden v'ayu avanim ha'ela zikron l'vnei Yisrael ad olam. You'll tell them that these signify the waters of the Jordan that were cut off before the ark of Hashem. when we crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. And the stones will remain a remembrance for the children of Israel forever. Now, by the way, these probably then, based on what we saw in Kisavo, are not the same stones. There's a lot of stones being carried around, because those stones, he said, what do you have to do? You have to write the entire Torah on them, and then v'sata osam basid. Then you had to coat them with lime or plaster or something. Okay, we don't have it. He's not mentioning anything about writing the Torah. He's just saying carry the stones with you so people will ask questions. Okay, do something out of the ordinary so that people will ask questions. Hold on to that.
Can I ask you a question?
You could ask me 8 questions.
No, just one. I mean, we see it all the time, and I don't know why I never asked this before, but where it says, "Vayomer lahem Yehoshua, Ivru lifnei Aron Hashem," pass before the Aron. Does that mean the Aron is going in front of them, which I always thought, or do they go in front, you go before, and the Aron comes after you?
That is a phenomenal observation on your part, I might add. And that's actually one of the cruxes of exactly what's going on here. You're an observant Jewess. I try to be an observant Jew. It actually means that the ark stands still and they're going in front of it. But this is meant to be sort of, if you want to look at this begadol, in contradistinction to whereas they were always being led, now they are going first and the ark is behind them. That doesn't mean that they're disregarding the ark, but it represents a transition from, first of all, also what's noticeably, what's missing, what's been with them all of a sudden is gone out of the picture.
Cloud?
Correct, the cloud. Now we know, the Gemara tells us that there were 3 miracles that they had throughout the desert. There was the cloud, as you mentioned. What were the 2 other miracles?
Man.
The man and the be'er. Now we know that the be'er was in the merit of Miriam, and as soon as she died, the water stopped, etc., etc., etc. And the man and the Anan were in honor of Aaron and Moshe. Now, no more Miriam, no more Aaron, no more Moshe. Guess what? Anan is just kind of like, all right, we leave that behind. But what does that mean? Wait, we've been walking for 40 years with this divine protection, with this divine force field around us, and now we're doing another water crossing, and there's nobody. First of all, there's nobody chasing us, so there's no need to separate. We don't need the anan or the fire to. We don't need it to guide us. The Aron was always there, this and that. Now we're going ahead of it, as if to say, "You're on your own." Not you're on your own, you're alone, but in other words, now you got to roll up your sleeves. You got to work. You're no longer living this miraculous divine existence. You're going to live now a very human sort of normal existence, even though it's going to be followed up right now by a zillion wars, which Hashem is going to fight for you. But the representation, which is but that's the crux. What you pointed out right there is exactly it. They're going in front of the ark. It changes the paradigm. The paradigm is they were always being led. Now you're leading. That's exactly it. That's a phenomenal observation on your part, one which I would not have picked up if I had not read the Mefarshim, because you're much smarter than I. See, she's not even arguing with me. Rightfully so. Anyway, I once tried self-deprecating humor. Wasn't any good at it. So anyway, these stones. I know these stones seem to be very different than what we saw in Kisavo. So just bear that in mind. We're going to go later in Yehoshua and see what happens, but I'm just saying for right now. Okay, so verse 8: Vaya'asu Kain b'nei Yisrael kasher tziva Yehoshua vayisu shtei esrei avanim mitoch Yarden kasher diber Hashem leYehoshua lemispar shiftei b'nei Yisrael vaya'avir imam el hamalon vayanichum sham. So the Bnei Yisrael did exactly like Yehoshua commanded. They lifted up 12 stones from the Yarden. So in other words, they had to find stones in the Yarden. I guess they had to be big stones. I don't know the stone layout of the Yarden. I mean, Israel has no shortage of stones. That's for sure. But you ever go you go visit someone in the cemetery and you can't find a stone to place on the grave? Have you ever been tempted to take off someone else's and Come on, you've done, yeah, you have been, right? So I actually have a friend of mine, she makes these personalized stones. So we bring personalized stones to like my father's grave and stuff like that, and people that we know and we love. Our own stones. That's why I know, like, these are my stones. Like, it have like has a name on it, has like yeah, like they're custom made.
Around town, you know.
They come a lot, yeah, they're like Pokemon cards. Yeah, they come in a little baggie. We go put them on. We go, we have for my wife's grandmother. We call them Stella stones. Her name was Stella. The Stella stones. We keep them in the car. Like, we always keep some in the car. Not a bad idea. Have your own stones. Or if you're going, like, if you go to the beach, oh, this is a nice stone. I'll bring it to my father loved the beach. Okay, I like a nice stone from the beach. Put it on his cover. Okay, but when sometimes you go and you can't find one, and you're digging down, you find a little tiny pebble. Like, oh, it's not nice. It's not covered like a little pebble. So then you're looking over. You're like, well, maybe it fell off. I don't know. Come on, we've all been there. I have lots of cemetery insights, but that's a whole other question. Anyway, so they took it, and they took it to the Malone. And they left it there. Ushtei mesrei avanim hekim Yehoshua b'toch Yarden tachas matzav raglei konim noserim bris vayushem ara yom hazeh. Wait a minute, and there's something else. Then Yehoshua, he took 12 other stones, and he puts them up in the middle of the Jordan, under the station of the feet of the Kohanim, the bearers of the Ark of the Covenant, and they remain there to this day. Now, I've always dreamt that one day we're going to kind of explore the Yarden, which shouldn't be that hard because it's like 2 inches deep over there. And we should be able to find 12 stones. But then again, does he put it in a shape? Did he just put them out there? Did he put them in a circle? Like, I don't know. But it says it's there until today. So, maybe that's the next installment of the Indiana Jones series. I don't know. Anyway, they were there. Hakanim nosei Aaron omdim b'toch Yarden atom kol hadavar asher tziva Hashem Yehoshua ledaber el ha'am kechol asher tziva Moshe v'yamaru am v'yavaru. So the Kohanim, by the way, all the people are crossing over. Now, by the way, there's no rush because there's no water that's rushing at them. It's stopped. It's dry. The Kohanim are just standing there as the people are passing by. They're standing in the middle until the completion of this. It says atom. What's the language? Atom kol hadavar, until this whole thing is done, like when the whole business is over, right? The language. So they're standing there, and they're standing in the middle of the Jordan until everybody, does what Hashem commanded. Okay, and then it says at the end though, vayimaharu ha'am vayavaru. The people vayimaharu, they hurried and they crossed. Hold on to that thought. So here they are hurrying. Vusmate hurrying. What are they hurrying about? Maybe Jews are always in a rush. Could be. I don't know. Let's hold on to that. Let's do a couple of more psukim. Vaya'avru. I'm sorry. Vayihi ka'asher tam kol am la'avor vayavar Aaron Hashem v'konim l'fnei ha'am. Right. So just like you said, the Lord said that now everybody crossed. Then the Aaron crossed last, and the Kohanim in front of everyone. So in other words, it still goes in front of them, but that actually went last. But this symbolic transition of them going in front of the ark. Okay. Vaya'avru b'nei Ruvain v'nei Gad v'chasi shiva v'Menashe chamushim l'fnei b'nei Yisrael kasher dibar lehem Moshe. And then, as we saw the promise that the 2.5 tribes that they said they're going to be the warriors, they won't settle their land outside of Israel proper until they battle and conquer for their brothers, the 9.5 tribes that are still in. They go chamushim, like Hashem, like Moshe told them they have to do. They're about 40,000 armed men. That's their militia that's going in front of them. This army that they have, they pass before Hashem into the plains of Yericho. And the last pasuk I want to do before we kind of drill down, Bayamahu Gidal Hashem es Yehoshua b'nei kol Yisrael vayiro so kasher yues Moshe kol yimei chayav. On that day, Hashem exalted Joshua in the eyes of all Israel, and they revered him, or they feared him, as they revered Moshe all the days of his life. This is it. Now Yehoshua is like Moshe because you know what? Hashem ennobled Yehoshua to such a way. Now he's on a Moshe status. Okay, that's quite a lot happening in the Psukim. Okay, let's look back now, and I want to tell you, I want to show you. I think that the text wants to point out obviously we're still looking at this, triumph versus fear, this confidence versus, uncertainty in both crossings. But I think they definitely want to draw your attention to earlier episodes. Okay. So if we go back to the beginning, okay. Again, here's we're going to jump around a little bit in the Chumash text. And I'm just telling you, because when I see certain phrases in the text here, it like the radar goes off. Right. So you have to be able to say, well, where have I seen that phrase before? Where have I heard that before? Okay. So in the second pasuk, first the Lord Tamu appears a lot. But that's for not really. I don't think it's necessarily part of that. But he says, take for yourselves 12 men. Now I could have just said 12 men, but it says ish echad mishavet. And then again in verse 4, it says ish echad mishavet. Now, where have we seen that before? Anybody want to take a guess on that one? No, again, I'm not. I have to look at these in a whole sense because
When they were counting them, each column, maybe. No, I made that up.
You didn't make that up, but does it say that in the? Let me look. Let me just think. Let's as Warner Wolf used to say, let's go to the videotape. Tell the kids go to videotape. What's a videotape? Is it on demand? Ish kofer nafsho. No, it doesn't really say that. But there is one place where it does say ish echad. So if you're in the Chumash page 798, what'd you say? Oh, winner, chicken dinner. Meraglim, chapter 13 in Bamidbar, page 798, beginning of Parsha Shlach. Okay. Hashem sees to Moshe. He says, Shlach lecha anashim, v'yasiru es eretz Canaan, asher ani naseh levnei Yisrael, ish echad, l'matei avasav tishalcha kol nasi b'hem. That's what happens. He tells him to send one from each tribe, but he uses this phrase, ish echad. So, okay, so let's use our midrashic. We'll put on our midrashic eyeglasses or our midrashic hats right now. So, why would the text here in Yehoshua want to draw us back to there in the Meraglim? Correct. Exactly. I mean, that was a debacle. That was as they would say, is this correct? A fashla. Right? That was a bad one. Fauda. I didn't watch it yet. Is it good? Anybody watch it yet? Was it good? Problem is, the only time I have to watch it is at night, and I can't watch it at night because I won't be able to sleep. This is a real problem. I don't know what to do. I need help. I have Fauda issues. Okay. So the correct. I think, but and twice it says it here. The last time we did ish echad, it ended up in you not getting into the land of Israel. Here, I'm telling you ish echad as you're going into the land of Israel. And what's the point of but think about what their mission is here to do in Yehoshua. Their mission is to take these rocks and to show, as we'll see in a second, what's the purpose of the rocks? The purpose of the rocks is to show that Hashem is giving you the land that he promised to your forefathers. Hashem is following through in his word. Your first time you did ish echad, you didn't have enough wherewithal to just trust in Hashem and say, this is the land. You let your own whatever take over, and you created an extra 38 and a half years or whatever the time was that was unnecessary, and you prevented an entire generation from going to the land of Israel. Here he's saying, this is what we might call the tikkun. This is the repair from the original ish echad. Okay, to me, when I see that in the text, especially not once but twice here in this sequence of 3 verses, it's undeniable. There's no question that the Torah is telling you that the text here is telling you, bing, 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 like pay attention to this. Look what's happening. Look what's happening. This is super important. Pay attention to this because it wants to draw your attention to that. Okay, fine. And then he says, fine. Ishachad, ishachad. There's a lot of like seulachem, wrist up, v'havartem, and pass over. Fine. And then he tells them, this is not necessarily a major thing. To me, it's a minor thing. I wouldn't make a whole case out of it, but when you put it as part of a larger conglomerate of phrases and words, v'hinachtem osam b'malon. The word malon appears twice. Okay. Do you know what this is a little bit more obscure. Do you know what the first time that we see the word malon in the story of the Exodus? It's a tricky one. In the beginning of Parashat Shmos, one of the stranger episodes in all of, I would say, even in the Chumash, you could argue. Okay. Page 310 in the stone. It's chapter 4 in Shemos, Perek Dalid, Pasuk Chaf Dalid, very bottom of the page of 310. Moshe finally gets the idea that Hashem wants him to go to Egypt and save the Jewish people. This is after he had been married and he had whatever. Okay, and then it says, "Vayhi baderach b'malon, vayivkesheu Hashem vayivakesh hamito." Okay, malon, not to be confused with the Hebrew dictionary. That's milon. Okay, they were on the way in the malon, in the lodging, and Hashem wants to kill Moshe. Now, why do you want to kill him? Then we have this. What happens next is that then Tzipporah, she takes a flint, a sharp stone, and she cuts off the foreskin of her son. She touched it to his feet, and she says, "You caused my bridegroom's bloodshed." So he released him. Then she said, "A bridegroom's bloodshed was because of circumcision." I mean, that's like a bizarre series of psukim. Who's saying what to whom? Why can't a woman be a moel? Like all these types of questions that come up. My mother always had a big issue. My mother was spent most of her career as a pediatrician, and she did probably thousands and thousands of circumcisions. So it was never a problem for my brother and I for a long time. My sister in Israel, can I know her? She had all the boys. My sister here had one boy. So the moil, that is very, very frum moil, and it was a friend of the family, as a rabbi, very, very frum moil, but he was most scared. He needed her approval. Because my mother's also a perfectionist, so she was like, "Why can't I? I do great bris milah. Why can't I? But it's a technicality in the halacha that, and the Gemara in Kedushin discusses that why a woman can't become a moel. They have these things called mohelet. Okay, whatever, whatever floats your boat. That's great. But halachically speaking, a woman cannot be a moel. But here we have the story that Tzipporah, she circumcises her son and says, because you're going to kill who's about to get killed? The son, Moshe. Anyway, I don't know if there's so much of a connection necessarily between our malon and that malon, but there was a malon before the process of the Exodus went into effect. They had this episode at the malon, and here before the process of settling into the land of Israel goes into effect, something has to happen at a malon. I'm just saying, you know what? It's not a very common word that appears. Okay. Again, I wouldn't build a whole case on it, but I would throw it in to the chalent, so to speak, of what we're talking about. Then he says ish echad, ish echad. Okay, now they had to take the stones. Okay, ish evan on. Okay, and okay, so we already discussed they had to take the evan. They had to take the evan when they're crossing the Yarden. Why does it have to? Could it just say take the rocks with you? But what does it say? Take the rocks and carry it on your shoulder. Right? So isn't that this week's Parsha? In this week's Parsha, let me just find it. Here, 358, Exodus 12, 37. The Jewish people, they journeyed from Ramses to Sukkoth. like 600,000. This is the origin of the Torah of saying like. Kit Sheish Meis Elef. Right? About because they're not so cool. Article like it's like ish. Yeah. And all the Erev Rav, okay. The Lamed Test 39. Vayofu Esa Batsek. Asher Tzim Mitzrayim Lochamez. They didn't have time, and the thing didn't have time to run. And they're 430 years. And after 430 years, they go out, and it's Leil Shimurim. Okay, we have that. And this is the story of the Exodus. Hold on. No, did I go too far? I have to find the right pasuk. So many different pasuks here. Sukim. Oh, here it is. I'm sorry. Go back a little earlier. In the middle of the night. Vahi v'chatzi halayla. Okay, v'chatzi halayla. By the way, so maybe you'd like this. Last Mosai Shabbat, I get a text from Sima telling me, it's only 12 weeks till Pesach. Right? Well, now, by the way, it's less. Yesterday was Rosh Chodesh Shvat, which means it's 2.5 months. We're about 10 and a half weeks from Sukkot, from Pesach. So we have to start, clearing the ShopRite aisles right after they finish with Valentine's Day and the Super Bowl stuff. Anyway, it's the Makas Bechoros. He says, get up and leave, and then take all your stuff. And then look at verse 33. The Egyptians, they opposed themselves to the Lebanon Year, strongly the people to send them out quickly. They said, we're all dying. The children of Israel then, what happened? They picked up the dough before it became leaven, their leftovers bound up, and their garments upon their shoulders. Al shichmam. So the first time they crossed, they had stuff that they had stuff on their shoulders. Now he's telling them to carry the rocks on their shoulders as a symbol. Okay, now, well, what's the point? What's the point of the symbol? What is the symbol? So the Navi Yehoshua tells us. Okay, what is the meaning of these symbols? So that it'll be an os bekir bechem. It will be a sign. That's a very, very prominent. Especially here in Parshas Bo, also in this week's Parsha, we talk about an os. It should be a sign, okay? And the one this pasuk is the one that stands out to me the most. Ishachad, Malon, this and that. But this one, it says, verse 6, Lamati ezos os bikir bechem, ki sha'alun b'nechem machar le'mor mo'avanim ha'ela lachem. When your children will ask you tomorrow, what is this? The Amar Tam Lahem, and you're going to say, this is a sign that God split the sea and God took us across and gave us the land which he promised. That's the crux of this whole paragraph here. Now, that should automatically say, wait a minute, this sounds very familiar to me, right? When your children should ask you, where's that from? Okay. We have it in Parshas Bo, where it says, so many different here. We like all these Seder type of references. Oh, and you're going to tell your children on that day that Hashem did this for me. It's going to be a sign. This is the mitzvah of tefillin. Okay. And look at the end of the parsha of Bo 13:14, chapter 13, verse 14. V'haya ki yishalacha bincha machar leimor ma'azos v'amarta elav b'chozak yer hotziana Hashem mitzrayim beis avadim. It will be ki yishalcha bincha, when your children will ask, when your offspring will ask you, machar, by the way. That's always the Jewish attitude. This is already, I'm getting into Seder mode. And Seder mode is always about thinking about the future. A thinking Jewish person thinks about the future. We're asking about yesterday, but you have to think like in the future, they're going to ask. You say like, wait a minute, because what my Rebbe always used to tell us was that when you're not sure about doing something, you have to ask yourself, is this something that my grandfather would approve of? And this is something that my grandchildren will be proud of. Like wiser words I have not heard. It's something my grandfather would approve of. It's something that my grandchildren will be proud of. It's a really good gauge, by the way. Hard to know. But look at that. the very end of this week's parsha. There's a reason why we're doing this today. V'haya ki yishalcha bincha machar le'mor mazos. And what does it say here? V'haya ki shalom b'nechem machar le'mor mohavanim ha'ele. We have a similar phrase that appears also in Parshas V'eschanan. If that's not enough for you, in Parshas V'eschanan, in right by the Ten Commandments, which we read right after Tisha B'av. Tisha B'av is always the same night as Pesach. It's much easier if you have the Haggadah in front of you because it's all right there. Oh, I'm sure there is. I'm sure there's photos.
I'm not quite sure why the stones are a sign. They're very heavy and they were hard to transport. Why couldn't they just take a little sand from the sea bottom?
Because who's going to recognize sand? Who's going to see sand? When you take these stones and you make a big monument, what do? We make monuments, right? Isn't that what we do? We make monuments. We build stuff. We have when somebody dies, we put up a stone. When everything in Bereshit, every time they did something, what happens? They would put up stones. They would make a matzeva. Again, I had this pasuk before. Of course, I should have marked it off in here. I had a different. Oh, here it is. V'eschanan. It's Devarim 6:20, page 976. Ki yishalcha bincha machar lemor. Again, notice the machar, but ki yishalcha, not. You have to tell them when they will ask you tomorrow and say, "What are these statutes and laws, etc." And then you have to say, because but in other words, you have something physical. So in the case of the Exodus, it's the sign matzah maror. They're going to ask you, what are these things? They're telling the story, and you have to say that you have to tell a story. Here also, they're going to see these physical items, these rocks, and say, what is this for? And you tell them, v'amartem lehem, because Hashem split the waters. They were splitting waters and splitting waters, okay? The final thing is they would say, the Kohanim would say, the two more things. I'm going to skip ahead to the last one before I do the penultimate one, just because I want to say the word penultimate. Verse 12 in Yehoshua, okay? Penultimate is the ultimate writing implement. Shkoyach. They were chamushim l'fnei bnei Yisrael. And we know that was their job, the 2.5 tribes, they had to battle. Okay? In the beginning of Parshas B'Shalach, okay, look at page 366. It's Exodus 13:18. Vayhi b'shalach paro. It says that they went out, and he took them around the long way, derech Yam Suf, and then it says v'chamushim alu b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim. They went up here. It translates armed. It says armed. Chamush. By the way, today in modern Hebrew, when you say they're doing an inspection, are you chamush? Right? Not to be confused with chumus. Okay, that's very different. If you ask somebody, are you chumus? It's funny when Americans try to speak Hebrew and we don't know Hebrew so well. My wife always tells a story that when she went to Israel for the year, and it was a while ago, that they didn't have such great Ivrit training. They knew biblical Hebrew. So go in a taxi, would say Bi Adoni. Like you speak in very biblical Hebrew. It's very funny. Nobody what are you talking about? Okay. Or we would say
Ani chafetza.
Right, ani chafetza, right, or ani paron, or can you tell me where the Beit Shemush is? Because in school it tells what the Beit Shemush, Sheratim, okay. So they would chamushim. There's a phenomenal Rashi's here. Chamushim could mean the play on the word chamesh, that only 1/5 of the Jewish population actually left Egypt because 80% died during the plague of darkness. But in other words, chamushim. But the last thing I want to show you, if you go back to verse 10, we saw that they waited till everybody could go. Now there was nobody was chasing them. But yet, what does it say? Vayimaharu. Now, what's the word that's used in Exodus when they It's a different. It's not mehirut. It's a different type. Now that's why I told you also. Our master Hebrew teacher here will tell us there are no such things as synonyms in Hebrew. Every different Hebrew word has a nuance to it. It means something. Like there's a difference between saying lirot or lehabit, lehistakel. Each has a different nuance of what it means. Correct. Vayomer vayidaber. It's not that. Otherwise, we just say you say. In English, we're not so fancy. So here, what's the word? So think about it. What's the word that we use in which gives rise to the whole matzah thing? You saw what I did there? Gives rise to the whole matzah thing. That they went out. We said we went out. Keep a blank yatsumi mitzrayim. What's the word? No, not zrizut. Zrizut is alacrity. Chipazon. Chipazon means like you're late for your flight and you're like trying to get through the gate and you're like running through. I had to go through the new Terminal A in Newark. They're still working at the kinks.
Oh, we went there the first day that they opened, and we got to Terminal A, and then we had to go. They changed our gate, and then we had to take some kind of transportation from Terminal A back to another terminal.
Right, because you have to take the shuttle to the air train to another terminal. It's Michigan. It's behind the old Terminal A. It's beautiful. And one of the big miles, they have these big fancy new machines that you don't have to take your laptop or iPad out of the bag. You can leave it in the bag and they can scan it. That's a big deal. You don't need a separate bin for your, okay. But also you don't have to take your shoes off in Israel. But whatever. But the machine doesn't work. So you're there, and like the stuff all got stuck in the machine. They have these giant poles with hooks to like pull the bag through the machine. It's like, really? Like, yeah, it's the first week. But like, if you're bechipazon, your flight is leaving, the gate is closing, you're chipazoning it like this. Okay, that's a balagan, rushing, like, I don't know if I'm going to make it type of thing. Somebody's chasing me. What's Vayimaher? Vayimaher is like in a hurry. So I think what Chazal point out is it's more of like a confidence of like, I'm excited. Like we have something that we have to accomplish, right? Exactly. Like excited, anticipating, it says you should, when like the way you run to shul, right? Not the way you run out of shul, the way you run to shul. Okay, you have to. So that might be more in line with zrizus. Zrizus is alacrity, but this, in other words, this sort of purpose. As a matter of fact, the Gemara, I put down this Gemara in Sota. The Gemara in Sota on Daf Lamed Daled says, "Odam b'Yardein Amar lahem Yehoshua." So while they were still in the Jordan, Yehoshua somehow communicated this. However, he communicated, he says, "De'u ama atem ovrim es Yardein al manash tarishu yoshvei haaretz minechem." He says, just know, he's giving him a statement of purpose. That you're standing in the Yarden, you're going into the land of Israel, so that you could now inherit the land. And by the way, you also have to kick out a few people. Okay? Imatem osim kain mutaf. If you do so, great. V'im lav, but if you don't have the conviction, if you don't understand the purpose of our mission, he says, water is going to come and it's going to wipe who out? You and me. In other words, the whole point of this is to have the inheritance of the land, but know that your mission is not like a free ride. You have work to do. Okay. The last thing is the real last thing. The last pasuk, which appears in its own, it's like its own parsha. Bayomahu gidalas Yehoshua b'nei kol Yisrael vayuroso kasher yos Moshe kol yimei chayav. Hashem elevated Gidal. Now, by the way, this is not I love the phrase, but it's not an Exodus reference. Once a lot we saw somebody who Gidal at someone else. Yes, chapter 3 of the Megillah, right? Achashverosh Gidal es Haman. That's an exact phrase. But here, I think if we look at, and it's something that we say every single day, and this kind of like, it's not, again, I think it's when you take it as part of the larger picture, but right before we say the Shiur every single day, finally there's the Jewish people. They're standing at the sea. The Egyptians are chasing them, and the water's in front, the water splits, and they go in, and what happens? It says right before the Shira that the Jewish people, Vayar Yisrael Sayar Gdolah Asher Hashem Mitzrayim, the people saw the great hand that Hashem did in Mitzrayim. Vayirom es Hashem, Vayaminu b'Hashem Moshe Avdo. Then in the eyes of the people, they feared God and they feared Moshe because of what they saw happening. Here they saw what's happening. Now they have the same attitude towards Yehoshua. It's Vayar, they saw, okay, and Vayiro so kasher Yos Moshe. They see what happens, and then Vayiro, so they feared now Yehoshua, just like they did Moshe, and you could add to that, just like they feared Hashem. So there's a lot telling, and again, it's so important to read the words of the psukim. Next time we're going to see about the significance of the date. We're going to tell us that it's going to be the 10th of Nisan. We get to Gilgal, and then finally, we can get into some of the battles. We have the battle of Jericho and this and that, and a lot of moving around. But this is so important with the connection between the Exodus, and it's so apropos that this is the parshas that we're reading this week and next week, etc. And we're already only a few weeks away from Pesach, so this is all going to come in handy. This could be a great, just this chapter alone could just be a great conversation at the Pesach Seder. Okay, you should just find a way to put on a timer and just play this. And for all of your brilliant insights, I think it would be really, really good. So anyway, have a wonderful day. Great to see everybody.
תודה
And-
רבה. תודה.
Yeah, take care. Bye.